Hello, welcome to Freethought Forum, a program by the Rationalists of East Tennessee and the Atheist Society of Knoxville. I'm Faithless Forrest.
And I'm Larry Rhodes, and we want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and other people curious about living a life free of supernatural beliefs.
Today we're revisiting a program or topic which was preempted from its April 19th date. We were going to discuss our place in the universe, and we will focus on what the Hubble Space Telescope has taught us in the 21 years since it was launched on its anniversary in April.
And a reminder, this is a call-in show. While we go over a few announcements, we invite you to start calling in now at the number on your screen, 215-2288. Get a pen and paper, and we will give you our email address later on in the show.
Let's mention the area code. For people who may be watching online, our area code is 865. So 865.
Mm-hmm. We have a happy hour at the Atheist Society of Knoxville tonight, and every Tuesday night down at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria in the Old City. It's a happy hour meetup, so it's starting right now. Look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion over my head, standing upright on the table to find us.
All right. Well, let's mention the activities of the Rationalists of East Tennessee. The first and third Sunday mornings of each month is a lively discussion or round table, maybe a presentation. However, this upcoming Sunday is July 3rd, and the meeting is canceled because many members want to attend the Free Thinking Picnic or gathering down in Lake Hypatia in northern Alabama. I wish I could go and meet Dan Barker again. He plays the piano, and they're going to do tunes and tunes. It's pianos and cartoons, I guess.
Music.
Yeah. Well, the second Sunday of each month is book club, and this month's book is The Moral Landscape: How Science Can Determine Human Values by Sam Harris. The third Sunday, July 17th, author and humanist Jennifer Hancock will present a talk entitled The Pursuit of Happiness: How Humanists Do It.
And you can visit our website for additional details, including times and locations of our meetups. We'll have that up on the screen here in a second.
All right, and I got notes here to prompt you to talk about, since the talk was about Lake Hypatia. It's named after Hypatia, and Larry, I know you're a fan of Hypatia. Why don't you mention briefly?
I dedicated my website, Digital Freethought, to it, to her. She was a mathematician and scientist and the head librarian of the Great Alexandria Library in Alexandria, Egypt, back about the time of Christ.
No, it was around the time of the fall of the Roman Empire in the 400s.
But it had existed for 800 years.
So the library pre-existed. I thought you were talking about Hypatia herself.
No. But the thing about it is the people around this great library, where all the research, scientific research, mathematical objectives were being sought, started to looking at the things that the scientists were doing as magic. They were saying it was a cult. This is not the kind of thing that we want to have in our Christian society. And the scientists, in their way, were kind of helping this idea go along. I mean, not necessarily intentionally, but because they were keeping their secrets to themselves and weren't talking about it to the general public, which was a mistake, because then the Christians and other religious groups of the time actually came to the library, tore it down, and burned it, and burned over 1 million books. That particular library was the shining
repository of knowledge.
Thank you. For humanity at the time, for the Western civilization anyway. And if you can imagine how much information and knowledge we have lost because of that one library sacking.
All right. Well, we'd like to also remind viewers about titles of upcoming books which the RIT Book Club will be reading. After this month's book, The Moral Landscape, will be 23 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism by, and I may mangle his name, Ha Jun Chang, Religion and Science by Bertrand Russell, and The Grand Design by Stephen Hawking. We encourage every participant to read the book who can, but you need not have read the book to come and participate at the meeting. Please see the rationalist.org website for the time and location.
Okay.
All right. We got our In the News segment.
In the news segment.
Okay, well, June is almost over, and Harold Camping's Jesus is about a month overdue. We note that there are now just 115 days of tribulation left. Of course, Camping's website has an excuse, or an explanation. It works like this. He says, "Indeed, on May 21st, Christ did come spiritually to put to put all of the unsaved throughout the world into judgment."
Nice that it's invisible, though.
Apparently an invisible judgment. But that universal judgment will not be seen physically until the last day of the 5-month judgment period on October 21st, 2011. That's right off their website.
The thing about it is, though, he was incredibly taken aback when it didn't happen visibly at that time. This explanation is something that he has come up with since that time, because he fully expected to see the newscasts of all the time zones going around the world.
The earthquakes and people rising into the air.
Now he said, "Oh, it happened. You just didn't see it."
It was apparently invisible. Well, I don't know about everyone else out there, but I'm making plans for well beyond October 21st, and I hope that members of ASK who spoke so enthusiastically about attending a Halloween season midnight showing of the Rocky Horror Picture Show will put together such a group. I'll go. Larry, have you ever seen the Rocky Horror Picture Show?
I have, at midnight. It was a lot of fun.
All righty. Okie doke. Well, what else is in the news?
News this week is out of New York. Marriage equality is extended to more Americans, but there are some Catholic Church officials who want to stay in the Dark Ages by injecting Bronze Age ideas from the same book condoning slavery. Do you happen to have a copy of that book, Andy?
Oh, yep. Got it right here. We encourage everyone to read this book, cover to cover.
And we're atheists. Read it.
Please don't turn off your moral conscience as you do so.
CNN reports, "We worry that both marriage," this is the Archbishop
They're quoting
talking.
Catholic bishops.
"We worry that both marriage and the family will be undermined by this tragic presumption of government in passing this legislation that attempts to redefine these cornerstones of civilizations." The Catholic bishop said in a joint statement released late Friday, and it was signed by Archbishop Timothy Dolan and 7 other bishops.
All right. Well, we object to the Bible being, picking and choosing from it, and we got to point out that the Bible says that eating shrimp is an abomination as well. So, the Christians are driven to this Bronze Age discrimination about marriage in Leviticus, which is in the Old Testament for those Christians who haven't read it. That's where Leviticus can be found. But we also encourage you to read these other laws. Leviticus 11, verses 19 to 12 says, "These shall ye eat of all that are in the waters. However, whosoever hath fins and scales in the waters, in the seas and in the rivers, them shall ye eat. And all that have not skins and scales in the seas and in the rivers, and of all that move in the waters, and of things, living things which is in the waters, they shall be an abomination unto you." So, when they don't have fins and scales, eating them is an abomination.
Yes, it's nice. Like, he doesn't even say it's bad for you. Don't eat it because you'll get sick. It's an abomination, which is the same thing that it says about homosexuality.
That's right. So it's actually equal. If you're going to say you got to condemn one, if marriage equality is something the Catholic Church can condemn and say it is going to attack the family, well, they should be condemning shellfish and shrimp scampi, one of my favorite.
Yeah.
All right. Larry, you want to read the other one we've got here?
Leviticus 9, chapter 19, verse 19. "Neither shall a garment mingled of different fabric come upon thee." In other words, don't wear mixed blend garments.
That's right. That's prohibited by Leviticus as well.
Yeah. How many laws are there in the Old Testament? Do you remember?
Oh, I don't know the number. I never counted. It goes on and
like
on.
613 or more, and all of them have the same weight of guilt if you break any of them, which of course is death, and much, much worse.
Yeah.
It says in Deuteronomy, I believe it's 28, says that if you break any of these laws, that God will bring you so low that you will be tempted, if not actually have to, eat your own children, and the woman, the mother, would keep her afterbirth from from the husband so that she could eat it. He would bring you that low if you break any of these laws.
All right. Well, that doesn't sound like a particularly pleasant deity.
No.
All right. Well, do we have some other things we want to address, or are we ready? Oh, yeah,
letter to the pastor.
We have a fictitious letter to the pastor from the website holysmoke.org, and it's a kind of a fun read. You want to tackle it, Larry?
Before I get into it, let's remind the viewers this is a call-in show. Number is 865-215-2288. We're accepting calls anytime.
Sure enough.
This fictitious letter to the pastor,
yes,
regarding this chapter 19 about mingling of garments starts off, Dear Reverend, I am writing to thank you and congratulate you for your diligent work against gay rights. People who, like gay men, break laws and casually mentioned somewhere in the Bible should not be given a civil rights protection. More Christians should be as dedicated as you in fighting basic civil rights and human dignity. Good work, Reverend. However, I am concerned that many people break other laws mentioned in the Bible that yet do not suffer such discrimination for their mere existence. I am specifically concerned about people who break the law outlined in Leviticus 19, verse 19. Neither shall a garment mingled of different fabrics come upon thee. Yet you can see people out in the street every day shamelessly wearing flannel shirts and wool sweaters, acrylic blends with cottons, and all manner of other sinful combinations one could imagine in a nightmare. This sort of disrespect for the laws of God is leading to the moral decay of our society. And that's even worse. They flaunt their perverse mixed fabrics in front of children. I've even heard that some of them like to dress children in mixed fabrics. But this sin is just too perverse for further elaboration. And of course, all people who wear mixed fabrics have a secret or overt desire to dress children the same way.
All right.
So, but it's one of the laws. It's God's word.
It's good to know that we know why now we have the decay of society. Yep. It's mixed fabric and shrimp scampi.
And homosexuals.
All right.
They're all equal.
Well, we polled the members of ASK and RAT and asked them about this development in marriage rights, and we received the following remarks from some members. I'll read from R here.
Okay.
R says, the Roman Catholic Church depends heavily on the concept of tradition for the continuance of its authority and practices. Any change to long-held beliefs and practices which they have endorsed constitutes a challenge to that authority and a challenge to their insistence that the Pope is infallible on statements about morals. Only when confronted with a completely untenable position do they admit error. Hence, it took over 400 years for an admission that Galileo was correct. The Church has also insisted on the intermediary between God and man at certain points in a person's life, including being an intermarried during marriage. Any marriages outside the Church diminish its role and the role of God and in the rights of man. Gay marriage is just one more step in this direction.
From P, another member, I have reason to be biased on this issue. My daughter has a female partner whom we love dearly, and we would be very pleased to go to their wedding. But they've been, they've been able to get married for years in British Columbia.
All right. Well, America's finally catching up. Another member, M, responds, I've long had a problem with basing rights on principles of biology and biological determinism. It seems to me as flimsy a concept of natural rights. What happens to the rights of homosexuals, defined as emanating from their nature, as science refines the not a choice position? I guess that's a question. So what would happen to it? I support the right to choose to be in a same-sex marriage, whether or not the individuals are even homosexual. So there's someone striking out for freedom even beyond the argument of biology.
Right. I think we've made our point. The Christian church and pastors, the Muslim imams and Jewish rabbis have no right to even try to use our government, whether local, state, or national, to enforce their book's random morals upon the thinking human beings against their consent.
All right.
That's one of the main tenets of the separation of church and state.
There we go. All right. Well, we've worked on that subject for a while, but today we're going to talk about our place in the universe. It was inspired by the Hubble launch about 21 years ago.
We are taking calls now at the number on the screen. There's a 7-second delay in the broadcast, so once you call, please mute your television and listen to us over the phone, or we will be confusing.
All right. Well, while our call screener talks to our caller, we'll begin a little bit and mention that, of course, July 4th is coming up, and with it are fireworks, and fireworks is a good place to start when we want to talk about the Hubble Space Telescope. Mm-hmm. All right, so look at those fireworks over Larry's head. Aren't they beautiful? So if we look at one real firework, it is an explosion due to chemical reactions, and this reaction heats the gas or the material out of which the rocket is made, and it to a pressure high enough to tear the rocket apart. And as it tears apart and expands, it cools as the hot material comes in contact with the atmosphere and radiates away the energy in the form of light and heat. Right. Can we move to the next slide here? There we've got an example of a single firework exploding. Now, this is just a static picture. Mm-hmm. But if we use our memories from past summers when we're out there watching the 4th of July fireworks, we remember how these things expand, and they may even change color a little bit as they expand.
Depending on the chemicals that they've built into them.
The chemicals, for some extent, determine the color at which they glow, but also as they drop in temperature, they will change color as well. And that drop in temperature is a little something we want to talk about. Okay, so imagine that there's a spherical surface of this stuff that is come off from the rocket.
Like the surface of a balloon as it expands.
As it blows up. And those form these points on the top of the, or on the outside of the fireworks.
Very outside edges.
So there's a point I want to make here. Not only is it that the material of the fireworks is coming out from the center, it's doing that, but for any of those points, as they come out, they expand away from each other. Mm-hmm. The distance between them is growing greater as the radius increases. Right. Mm-hmm. All right, so you got that. Now, when scientists look at galaxies in the universe around us, and we need the next slide there, Sam. Oops, back up one. It should be in between. It's this. There we go. We see a similar thing. The galaxies move apart as a function of time. Mm-hmm. And so each of these horizontal planes that are drawn here represent sort of a snapshot in time. Mm-hmm. And the galaxies are moving apart. Mm-hmm. All right. Well, we got another caller again.
We must have lost the first one for some reason.
We'll remind them to turn down the volume on their television before they speak to us. All right. And when we look at this expanding material, just like a fireworks, we know, we watch how it expands. We could imagine running the movie backwards, and we know that it would go to a point. The fact that it's expanding around a sphere, it gives us that clue. All right, looks like our caller is ready. You want to introduce us?
Sure. Welcome to Freethought Forum. Can we have a name or a nickname?
Please.
Yeah, hello.
Yes, you'll need to turn down your TV and pay strict attention to the phone.
There's a delay.
A slight delay that's going to throw you off.
Hello, can you hear me now?
I can. Go ahead. Do you have a name?
Oh, atheist.
Hello.
We are, yes.
Oh, I got a question for you.
Sure. Can you give us a name or a phone or a nickname so that we can speak to you and address you by
Ben. Okay. What's your question?
Where in the Bible does it say if you're gay you go to heaven?
In fact, the Bible says that to lie with another man as one lies with a woman is an abomination.
That's right.
So we didn't say that it says you go to heaven.
Atheists don't either, so I'll pray for your soul. Goodbye.
Well, we're not going to go anywhere after we die.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this might be a good time for the prayer challenge. Mm-hmm. We really don't want you to pray for our souls. If you really do have the ear of the creator of the universe, we don't think you do, but if you really do have the ear of the creator of the universe, we think there's a more valuable prayer that you could make. It is our observation that Christians do not really pray for worthwhile or important things. Why? It is as if they are afraid to for fear of confirming the truth. Nothing fails like prayer. If the Bible be true, prayer can do anything. We challenge you to make a worthwhile prayer, not a little one which you know can come true by chance, or which a little God could do. We want to challenge you to make a big prayer. Do you think that Jehovah is a big God? If you do, you'll make this prayer. Congress has declared May 5th, 2011, the National Day of Prayer, and I believe next year it's going to be May 4th. We challenge you to pray that all of the men and women in the armed services who are bravely serving our nation and who have lost limbs or eyesight or had their brains damaged are relieved of that their limbs are restored. And we don't mean artificial limbs, because that's what humans can do. We want to see their limbs magically restored, just like prayer says it could be done.
We're not even asking for God to bring the fallen back to life. We're just asking to pray to restore limbs to those who have lost them in war and serving our country.
All right. So now that we've been prayed at and we've asked for a real prayer of meaning, let's move back to the universe.
If that would happen, I might actually think that there was something to this.
Yes, and certainly that it was a God worth admiring.
Okay.
All right. Well, I think we were talking about the expansion of the universe, and I was explaining how similar to how fireworks works, that if we were to play the movie backwards of fireworks, we would see how it goes back to a point. We know from looking at how the galaxies around us expand, as if they're all moving away from us,
Right.
that if we were to play time backwards, they would all move together.
Right.
Further, that they would all be together in a very high density, about 13.7 billion
Take
years
all
ago.
the matter in the universe and bring it to a small space, it's going to be extremely high temperature.
That's what happens when you compress any matter, and so we also know that if we played the universe backwards, so to speak, it would be at not merely a high density, but a high temperature. All right, and so if we look at the current slide, we can kind of see that. Even fireworks, after there's that initial velocity, which is high compared to gravity, gravity is relentless. It keeps working on it, and so we get some of these things falling. Now, in the case of fireworks, they're falling towards the Earth, because that's where the large gravity source is. But in the case of the universe, it's distributed uniformly throughout. So the universe will contract on itself uniformly.
If it has enough gravity in entirety, it would normally bring itself back together again.
And so if gravity is going to pull everything back together, we might think that it might be possible that there would be a new state of high density and pressure, which gets nicknamed pejoratively perhaps the Big Crunch. So the question back in the 80s when I was going to school is, does the universe have enough mass to make this happen? And this works out to be a big if. If there's enough mass in the universe, then the gravity of all of the galaxies will cause the expansion to slow down and stop, and the galaxies will then fall together, reversing the motion of the diagram. So this is the Big Crunch. The reason the Hubble Space Telescope was built was with a goal to be able to measure very accurately the past and current expansion of the universe, and to see if it was slowing down, and if so, by how much. From this measurement, the mass of the universe could be calculated, and we would know if the universe would expand forever, or if a big crunch was coming. Now, isn't that an interesting question to be asking? And what's cool is that human beings in the late 1980s had the technology at their fingertips and knew how to find a way to get an answer to that question. All right. So in the 1980s, Hubble was built, and in 1990 it was launched. Well, 21 years later, with the help of other great telescopes, Hubble's not the only one, we have a revolutionized view of star formation, star evolution, and star death. We've learned about how galaxies evolve, and we've learned about the distribution of mass within the universe.
Had many surprises along the way, too.
Well, and it has given us an answer to that original question we posed about the fate of the universe, which we would never have imagined. So, what was that question again? We need that diagram. The next diagram. Okay, here we go. So, with apologies to Douglas Adams, the ultimate question, life, universe, and everything, that was not the ultimate question, and to which the answer was only 42. Well, it turns out, and here we need the next slide, is the universe finite? Oops, and we move along to one more slide where we got the big one. So we get the big slide up. There we go. So what this shows us is what would happen if the universe had a lot of mass. See if I can work my way along it. In the past here, which is over on my side of the graph, the universe is expanding at a slow rate, and then it goes to Larry and collapses again. And this curve is for the mass of the universe 6 times the critical mass. Which
in other
happens,
words, if it had an awful lot of mass, then it would pull itself back in, which is what's represented by that curve.
Which is what's represented by the curve that leaves me and goes to Larry. All right. Now, if the universe had just enough mass that it could expand forever, if it had what's called escape velocity, then it would just expand forever, always slowing down, but never turning around, never collapsing. That amount of mass is called omega equals 1 because it's a figure of merit as to whether or not the universe is right at the edge of what we might think of as being a black hole. It's self-contained. Not even light could escape it. There's another interesting curve here. It's the solid line. That's the line for an empty universe. If the universe, if all the galaxies were expanding in the universe, but you could turn off gravity. So that they just kept floating with the velocity they have, that's the path the universe would follow. But the most amazing thing that was discovered is and I've lost my place here, is that the universe is on a curve that was none of the above. It's on a curve that is pitching upwards.
So we're not going back down to the smallest. We're not. It doesn't look like it's going to go back to the crunch.
No.
Or even constantly expand.
Well, in fact, what it tells us is that there's some physics going on that we had no clue was happening prior to this. The assumption is that only gravity acted over long distances enough to affect the future of the universe, and so the question all revolved around how much mass is there, because that's what makes gravity.
Right.
But it turns out that the expansion of the universe was not slowing down, and in fact, about 5 billion years ago, about the time the sun was forming, the expansion of the universe began to speed up. Now, that was something unexpected, and it cannot be explained in terms of gravity. In fact, what it's interpreted is that there is something going on that is a force rather like a negative gravity. But the interesting thing about it is that force was not dominant until about 5 billion years ago. Prior to that, the universe, the expansion, actually was slowing down because there is mass, gravity was working. But this new physics, this new phenomena that was discovered, is a repulsive force, and it's due to there being something analogous to Einstein's famous mistake what he called his famous mistake, the cosmological constant. Right. This is an energy that has a pressure that expands empty space. And because of this expansion, the universe is not going to slow down. Now, let's make a little caveat here. Given what we currently know. Now, this expansion, of course, represented something we didn't know about, and there's nothing that says we now know about all forces that could possibly exist.
Right. What
we currently know is that the universe is expanding underneath this pressure, and we know of nothing that can counteract it. There are speculations I've read that says that the result of this will be that galaxies, which are bound by gravity pretty tightly, will separate from each other indefinitely, but that the galaxies will stay intact.
Local clusters.
And
what about those?
And in fact, the speculation is that our galaxy, the Milky Way, and the nearest large galaxy, Andromeda, are moving towards each other. They will merge, pass through each other in about 1 billion years, I believe it is. Maybe it's 2 billion. And the expansion of the universe is not strong enough to overcome that. But our two galaxies are the largest two of the local cluster. It's thought that the other galaxy clusters will expand away from us, and something on the order of, I think, 2 to 5 billion years. It's a remarkably short time. They will expand away enough that their light will be redshifted, and we won't see them anymore. And so that leads us to conclude that future astronomers, if they aren't able to access records we leave behind, future astronomers looking out will think that they're in a very large empty space, and
there will be, but they won't have any clue
how large it is,
and not only that, but where it came from and how
old it is.
The Big Bang or any of the background radiation will have all faded away. All the evidence would have gone. So they will look at there and they'll make conclusions, but the conclusions will be wrong because they just can't see the evidence.
Because they have a subset of the evidence, it's a charitable thing. We should remember that at times in the past, science has been wrong because they made the best choices on the evidence available, and the ancient Greeks thought that the sun revolved around the Earth, actually for very, very kind of justifiable reasons.
Oh, yeah.
Because to assume that the Earth moved around the sun would also mean that, well, then you should probably assume that the stars out there are other suns, and if the Earth is moving around the sun, those other stars, those other suns, we should see their motion relative to each other as we move around within this sort of forest, let's say, of other stars.
But they had no clue how far away those other stars were.
Yeah, and in fact, certainly some of them made the argument that they are other stars, in which case Hipparchus, the scientist who made the argument that, well, if the Earth was moving around the sun, we would see parallax shift. He would say the only way that would be the case is that you're having to assume they're very far away, which is a kind of a post hoc excuse you're making as opposed to, good science.
Right. What's funny was that they actually were seeing a parallax shift on planets as the planets went around, and as the planet got on one side of the star or the other, the sun, they would see a parallax shift against the background. But at that point, they thought the planets were just stars too. So it was weird.
That's right. Well, now that parallax shift, of course, went by the ancient name retrograde motion, and retrograde meaning it moved against the generally eastern motion in the sky. For a while, planets would back up and
make a little loop,
move westward. Yeah.
This might be a good time to do the mid-program break. Do you have that?
Sure enough.
Handy?
We can jump to that. All right. I can start in case you're catching up.
Yeah.
If you're just tuning in, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee and individuals who make contributions. All right.
You can send us feedback at the email address above on your screen, but don't wait. Call in now. This is a live call-in show on June 28th, 2011.
Yeah, we want to speak to you today about the universe, our place in it, or perhaps the validity of prayer, which we've also already talked about.
Right. The Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets several times during the month, and we have a meetup this evening for fun, food, and drink down at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria. We invite anybody who's atheist or atheist-friendly to come down and converse with us. Please don't come to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch. I think you met Dillahunty, but we'd like to see you down there.
All right. You want to read your mission statement?
Our mission statement at ASK is to supply a venue for community, camaraderie, and outreach to the rationalists and atheists of the Knoxville area. Remember, if you don't believe in God, you're not alone.
All right. Well, the Rationalists of East Tennessee has Sunday activities involving lively presentations and discussion of subjects both topical and timeless. Past discussions have been what is art, the evolutionary history of flowers, and thinking rationally about climate change. About once a month we get together for book club. Past books that we have read include The God Delusion, The American Age of Unreason, the virtue of selfishness, wither socialism, and your inner fish. That was one of my favorite. All right.
I'd also like to recommend that people find The Demon Haunted World by Carl Sagan. And I might take a minute to talk about Cosmos just for a second.
Sure.
Carl Sagan did a documentary back in 1980 called Cosmos. It's like 13 hours of science and adventure in the intergalactic space, and also down to the atom and into the mind. It's called A Personal Voyage by Carl Sagan. With Cosmos, Carl Sagan and his wife and co-writer Anne Druyan brilliantly illustrated the underlying science of his same-titled book, Cosmos, placing the human species within a time and space context that brought the infinite into stunningly clear view. The series, which originally aired in 1980 on PBS, has been seen by more than 700 million people worldwide and remains a high watermark in miniseries history. You can find this online at topdocumentaryfilms.com. It's free. topdocumentaryfilms.com/cosmos/ and you'll be able to go there and watch all 13 hours for no charge.
All right, well, that's great. Well, let's mention Camp Quest quickly and move on back to the program. Camp Quest is the atheist agnostic alternative to summer Bible camp, or summer Bible school, I guess. It is a fun summer school adventure. Visit the website smokymountains.camp-quest.org, or go to the rationalist.org website and look for the Camp Quest link. The camp starts late in the month. I think they may still be able to take a few reservations. And if you've got a youngster between, I believe, the ages of about 8 and 17, and would like for them to have a science and deity-free summer experience, Camp Quest would be good. Supernatural free. There we go. All right. Well, so we're talking today about the expansion of the universe.
And our place in the universe.
And our place in the universe. And the exciting discovery that the expansion of the universe was speeding up. And if we go back to that big curve with all of the lines of expansion, this gives us a little more to talk about. You see the curve that turns up steeply there, Larry?
Uh-huh.
It's labeled with omega sub m equals 0.3 and omega sub lambda equals 0.7. Those omegas represent masses. Remember, omega 1 was the amount of mass necessary for the universe to be closed. Well, it turns out that this dark energy we talked about that is causing the repulsive force, well, it has mass. And the amount of mass it has is actually 0.7 or 70% of the amount of mass necessary to close the universe. Now, through other observations made by telescopes, the Hubble and others included, we know that galaxies are made not just of the mass that forms stars, which is protons and neutrons, but another kind of mass that doesn't interact with protons and neutrons called dark matter. And that dark matter corresponds to 30% of the universe. Now, if you add up 30% and 70%, that's 100% of the universe. There's a little bit of a rounding error. Mm-hmm. The normal matter that you and I and everyone in the viewing audience is made up of, protons and neutrons and electrons, actually constitutes something like about either somewhere between 1 to 5% of the whole universe. So it turns out that the universe of things we can see is a small percentage of all that exists, and all that exists, the majority of what exists, are things we would never have suspected exists, especially the dark energy, if it weren't for having built the Hubble Space Telescope. So our place in the universe is to now discover that not only are we small creatures living on the surface of a big Earth, going around a huge sun in a really huge orbit that's inside a solar system going on an orbit around a really huge galaxy, moving through a really huge space. Most of the universe is filled with something that we don't know what it is,
Mm-hmm.
and we know almost nothing of its properties. We know that dark energy has a repulsive force. We know that dark matter experiences normal gravity. It has an attractive force. And that's about it. That's all we know with certainty. The next generations of space telescopes and I think some of the cosmic ray detectors are meant to try and detect some of the properties that are speculated dark matter might have, and I think and that there's thought that the dark energy might affect the polarization of light in the universe. I could be mistaken on that one.
It's an area I haven't gotten into yet.
I'm self-taught on these things, and I've reached the point where I'm no longer on firm ground. My feet have definitely gotten into the water, and my toes are wet.
You're hanging 10 on the edge of knowledge. We'd like to remind our viewers that this is a call-in show. The number's on the screen, 865-215-2288. We're talking about our universe and our place in the universe.
All right. Well, we've talked a lot about the Hubble Space Telescope here. And the reason it was built was to measure the rate of expansion of the universe. And it did so really well. And it used to be when I was in college in the late 70s that we said the universe is probably somewhere greater than 7 billion and probably less than 21 billion years old. As a result of the Hubble Space Telescope, we know that the universe is 13.7 plus or minus 0.2 billion years old. What a remarkable thing to be able to say. That, first of all, 100 years ago to talk about the age of the universe would have been unfounded speculation. Now we talk about the age of the universe with a precision that is on the order of a few percent.
That is amazing.
And we've got good confidence in that number. Mm-hmm. It's very unlikely any discovery we're going to make is going to change that plus or minus 200 million years outside of it. Mm-hmm. Because almost any discovery we're going to make has to not contradict the things that we've found.
Right.
Just like we can say, well, before we knew about general relativity, we didn't know everything about gravity. Well, that was true. But it didn't mean that if I let go of this pen,
it would stop.
That
Gravity
it wasn't going to fall.
Yeah,
that's
but
right.
we have a much finer education or knowledge about gravity now and the effects of gravity and what happens in a massive gravitational field that we didn't know before.
And I want to remark about the Hubble Space Telescope. It was built for an initial cost of about $1.5 billion. And if you work that out with the population of the United States at, roughly 275, 300 million persons, that's somewhere around $6 per person. So,
chump change.
Well, you spend that much for a combo meal at your favorite fast food place. And it certainly is a lot less than the cost of a Bible. I don't think you could buy a Bible in the bookstores.
Now, no, you can get them for free, though.
Well, I was about to say, in the bookstores, if you pay for them, you pay more than that. But if you're going to get a Bible, you can get them like I got mine. Every hotel room has these things in them, and you can pick them up there for the cost of a night's stay, or included in the cost of your night's stay. All right. Well, so in addition to giving us the answers to questions I've not even touched on in this program, it has revealed a universe that is seething hot in places. It is deathly cold in places. It is so large as to strain the imagination, and it is immensely old. 13 billion years. We throw these numbers around, but there was the Earth is only 5 billion years old.
And the Cambrian explosion was only
about half a billion years ago. The Cambrian explosion is when living creatures first started to get hard parts. There was life.
Exoskeletons. And
there was life on the Earth not long after it got a solid crust. The Earth got a solid crust around 4.2, maybe 4 billion years ago. And there's evidence for life, I believe, of 3.9 billion years.
But multicellular life hasn't been around for like 500 million years out of the 4.5 billion years that the Earth has been here.
Well, there's another landmark in the development of life, and that's 1.2 billion years ago is the first evidence for cells that have nuclei. Now, cells that have nuclei are the ones that then learn to stick together and form complex body plans. There is evidence for bodies that is Precambrian. There's the Ediacaran, and there's some pre-Ediacaran. There are things that don't leave fossils very well. They might be jellyfish, but in the, I think it's called Ediacaran, there's the first little hard parts. It's not even understood what those parts are. They're called small shelly stuff. They might be like the scales on the outside of a living creature, or they might be a hard part inside. The answer is that from the remains, we can't tell what they are. You know, they might be individuals themselves or not. But come the Cambrian, around 500 billion years ago, probably because the oxygen content in the atmosphere was rising, and maybe because the CO2 content of the atmosphere was decreasing, creatures began to have hard parts, and the hard parts leave fossils much more readily.
Right.
And that happened during a period of around 100 million years in the Ediacaran and in the Cambrian. Right. So it's really funny. That's an explosion in the sense of the age of the Earth, but it's still a gradual thing. And the creationists who get real caught up in saying you can't explain the Cambrian explosion and how life hasn't changed since then. There was a letter to the editor this past week about how life has been static since the Cambrian explosion. He doesn't realize that the only example of chordates, which is what you and I are, creatures with a backbone and a notochord, was an object that if you looked at it, it wouldn't even look as advanced as a minnow. And apparently he doesn't think there's any difference between himself and that minnow. I'm not ready to go there. I think that you and I are a little different than minnows.
How many millions of years did the life exist in the sea before it came on land?
From about 3.9, certainly by 3.5, all the way up to about 0.5 billion years ago. So about 3 billion years.
So that was a long period of time for us to resemble swimming objects in the sea, which were more primitive than a minnow.
I got your question here. Actually, from the time of that, it's called a Pikaia, which is Cambrian. That's about 500 million years ago. Creatures first colonized the land around 300 million years ago. So about 200 million years to transform to a body plan that was capable of stepping out on the Earth's surface.
200 million years. And land animals have only been around for 300 million years, so that's a huge portion of that period of time that was spent in water before we even came ashore.
That's true. All right. And it doesn't look like that caller is going to come in to us. Okay, well, the line is free. We've got 10 minutes about 11 minutes left. Mm-hmm. Please give us a call. We're talking about our place in the universe, what science has taught us.
Let's talk about the future. What's going to happen to us if we don't get off this planet and go to some other planet or find at least some place that we can move humanity to?
All right, well, Hubble and other telescopes have taught us about something called stellar evolution, how stars evolve, how they age. Our star has a fuel that it consumes, hydrogen. It converts to helium. And while that fuel remains, our star is relatively stable. Mm-hmm. And it will have enough hydrogen to burn for about another 5 billion years. It's about halfway through its fuel. However, as it burns the hydrogen into helium, there's a helium core that accumulates, and it changes the stellar dynamics. Mm-hmm. And the sun will actually gradually burn a little hotter.
We're still currently burning
hydrogen into helium. Mm-hmm. And we say burn, but a better term is actually fuse.
Fusing. Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure I'll slip back into saying burn. Mm-hmm. As we fuse more hydrogen into helium, the dynamics of the sun change, and the sun will burn hotter. And in about 500 million years, the sun will have increased in temperature so that liquid oceans will no longer be sustained. And once the water that's in the Earth's atmosphere boils off and enters, once it boils off and enters the atmosphere, it becomes more prone to ultraviolet light, disassociating the oxygen and the hydrogen. that causes the hydrogen to get lost to space because as a lighter element, it moves faster.
It can literally evaporate into space.
And it gets lost to space. And we'll be left with an atmosphere that looks like Venus's. Venus's atmosphere...
which you don't want.
Venus's atmosphere experienced a runaway greenhouse effect. The water that was in its atmosphere got disassociated, and the hydrogen got lost to space. The oxygen that was in the atmosphere combined with carbon and became CO2. So it has an atmosphere that is largely CO2.
And much of it is what is it? Acid? What acid? Hydrochloric acid.
The presence of sulfur and
Sulfuric
oxygen
acid,
forms sulfuric acid. It's just plain a nasty place. And the Earth's atmosphere, I believe, will evolve to something much more like that after the oceans evaporate into the atmosphere.
In the past, Russia and I think America also tried to put landers on there, probes on there.
I believe there have been 2 successful landers onto the surface of Venus. The Russians
how long did they last?
Well, they landed in an environment hot enough to melt solder, and I don't know if they used high-temperature alloys, because they knew what they were up against. But they landed, they actually returned pictures from the surface, but they didn't last more than half an hour, that kind of time frame.
Plus, they got some X-ray pictures going in, I believe, of the land.
Yes.
And topography.
Yeah. Well, the United States has sent a marvelous orbiter around Venus, whose name, I'm trying to say Magellan, but don't quote me on that. And they use something called synthetic radar, synthetic aperture radar, to map the surface, and that produced a very detailed topographical map of the planet. And from that, we can see that Venus once had tectonic activity. I think it's disputed as to whether or not tectonic activity continues there. It may be that it has now formed a sufficiently solid crust that there's no more plates moving against one another. Mars no longer has tectonic activity. It may once have, but it would have been much longer ago because Mars is so small, it cooled faster.
Quicker. This is one of the things between religion and science. Science has the capability of, after much study and mathematical research
and new data,
to be able to take a rocket, throw it into space, and put an object around in an orbit around any planet that it wants to. Science can pretty much make predictions where religion only claims to make predictions. I mean, the predictions of the Old Testament have come true in the New Testament, but the people writing the New Testament had the Old Testament in their hand to be able to write it and say, yeah, this is the way it happened.
So let's see, that's called a post-diction, not a prediction,
that's right?
Yeah. So I think you're fond of saying that science may have questions that cannot be answered, but
religion has answers that may never be questioned. You need to ask.
And we know that some of their answers have not proven to be...
the Dark Ages was 500 years of non-answers and stagnation of about human progress. Another thing about Christianity in particular is, why bother doing any of this stuff if Jesus is going to be back next week? You know, we don't have to worry about getting off the planet. We don't have to worry about conserving our resources or treating the planet well. You know, next week's going to be over. You know, there is no future. I much prefer the future view of Star Trek to Christianity. At least in Star Trek, we have a future, and it's nations working together, humanity working together for common cause.
And it's a beautiful future that we make. It's a future that we have to choose.
And it's a possible future.
And it is a possible future. I think interstellar travel will be difficult. I think we'll have to do it with microbes.
Right.
But nevertheless, the possibility of finding and conversing with other intelligence with the SETI program is not zero. It's a long shot.
It is a long shot.
I'll say it's a long shot.
The universe is a huge place.
But
even the galaxy is a huge place.
But it's yes. I was reminded of another great telescope that has been put into space. I believe it was launched on its own rocket. It didn't go right up on the space shuttle. It's the Kepler probe. Kepler is a telescope with, I think it's like 90 million pixels. and it's just looking up at a spot in the sky in the area called Cygnus. Cygnus is a summer constellation that we can go out at night and see during the summer.
And it's a dark spot in the sky, isn't it?
No, it's a spot that's loaded with stars because they're looking along the edge of the Milky Way.
Okay. That was a different thing I was thinking of.
You were thinking of the Hubble Deep Field.
Deep Field.
We'll end the program with the Hubble Deep Field.
Okay.
But Kepler's looking at a spot along the edge of our galaxy, and it's up above the atmosphere where there's no periodic disturbances, so that it can see all of those stars steadily. And it's looking for the changes in brightness that are the signature of a planet passing in front and reducing the brightness. And it's really cool. You can tell the difference between a planet passing in front versus, let's say, a sunspot. We know our star has sunspots, and those spots are less bright. It turns out a sunspot that's on a star, as it rotates, the sunspot's viewed edge on, and so it doesn't block much of the light earlier, and as it rotates, it blocks more and more. But when a planet crosses in front, it goes from blocking no light to its full disk once its disk is fully on.
So it doesn't vary.
So the shape of the light curve is different, and you can tell the difference between a planet versus sunspots. It was the coolest thing once it was explained to me how that was possible, because my first thought is sunspots are going to ruin it for you.
Yeah. Okay, what about the deep field? Real quick.
Okay, well, I think our last slide of the day is the revealed universe. And this slide was suggested by one of the members of RET. And we've got a little observation here by another one. So Larry, as an atheist, I can marvel at some of the poetry in the Bible and other works of religion. I'm a big fan of Egyptian artwork. But I must say that these are inventions of human art and human hands. On the cosmic scale and time, our lives are brief. But in what time we live, with the vision of Hubble, I am dazzled by the nature which surrounds us, and my curiosity burns just like those stars.
Believers generally like to say, our God is an awesome God. When you look at this, you cannot help but be awed. The Hubble pointed its telescope at a dark area of sky and let it sit there for how long? Days?
A couple of weeks. I think it's something like, it may be 14 days, it might be 10 days, a long time.
To let the light gathering capabilities of the Hubble bring out anything that may be hiding in there that's shining, the very, very dim. But this is what you got. Just hundreds of galaxies in a tiny, tiny spot of dark space. And if you can conjecture from this that any direction that you point your telescope in, you're going to see more of the same. It's just awesome. It's amazing.
All right. Well, I have one more quote to read. Can you get our closing statements ready while I offer this? One of the RET members provided this observation. Science provides unparalleled intellectual excitement and satisfaction in understanding the place of man in nature, something the timid who feel compelled to stay immersed in mythology will never understand and experience. We must point out, for those who say their God is an awesome God, that this book does not describe the universe that you and I live in.
No, that book came out of human minds, and like human minds, it has human expectations.
And limitations.
All
right.
But
we got our minute to go?
About 1 minute to go. It's time to start wrapping things up, to get out pen and paper, to take down our email, to send us feedback if need be, if you want to.
All right.
Freethought Forum at yahoo.com.
All right. You can call this station and purchase a DVD of this and past programs. This has been Freethought Forum with Faithless Forrest,
Larry Rhodes.
We want to thank Sam and Jonas for our technical support, and to the staff at CTV Knoxville, and to all of our callers. We wish we'd had a few more. And
Carl Sagan would say, somewhere something incredible is waiting to be known.
Thank you much.
Thank you.